Hello there and welcome to The Value of Everything. I'm pleased to welcome the Sydney Contrarian to the show. You can find him and his videos on YouTube. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be here, Charles.
Right, so I think we sort of had a little discussion over Discord and wanted to cover a few topics. Particularly, I think we're just got interest in economics and how people just view their financial situation, and probably a little bit blindsided to a lot of things that happen in the world. So
Yeah,
so I think one of the first things that you came to me with was just talking about the low interest rate environment and its distortion on the economy, especially when it comes to personal savings and investment.
yeah, yeah. So I think people don't realize that the interest rate is currently centrally planned. It's actually set by the Reserve Bank of Australia. And I think it's a problem because with most things, you're supposed to expect that the interest rate is a price actually of money, and it's also the price of risk and a price of delayed consumption.
Yep.
With prices, that's normally supposed to be set by supply, the power of supply and demand. But unfortunately, we currently have the interest rate that's set centrally by a bunch of people who sit around at a table has who have economic honors and PhD degrees. Some of them haven't actually really had a day of work in a proper job, and so they're actually going about saying, "Oh, well, we think this should be the right interest rate in order to spur growth and to keep certain people employed or reduce unemployment." And most people don't know anything better about the interest rate other than what they're paid in their savings account. I mean, even as a student myself, I just took the interest rate as what it was. I did a degree in actuarial studies and applied finance, and we weren't taught the common sense of economics and finance. We were just taught the mathematics behind it, the economic theories. And when I came out to this world, I didn't realize that a lot of the things that I had learned, I was not really able to apply it properly in real life. And am I speaking for myself? Is this what you normally hear with people that you talk to and on a day-to-day basis?
Not really, no. You're one of the few.
Yeah, because I mean, 10 years ago, when the subprime crisis just started, Australia still had a high interest rate. So you could sit there, put your cash in a bank account. And I remember with my Citibank online savings account, I was getting 6.25% per annum. So you just twiddle your thumbs, put your cash in there, and you get 6.25%. Easy as, right?
Yeah.
I don't really need to go and speculate in the financial markets, property, and I should be able to get. I should be able to grow my wealth. And then by about September, October, they cut interest rate by 1%, and by the end of I think 2009, interest rates for the RBA was down to about 4%, 3.5%.
Yeah.
And so did the bank. So did the bank savings accounts. Now, most people then they were more worried about the stock market. They were more worried about the superannuation to care about the fact that they weren't saving up enough. And I mean, what do you think the real rate of inflation is? How much the price of living, the cost of daily living, how much do you think that's actually going up by on a per annum basis?
It's a tricky one because obviously we don't, you see what the headline inflation rate is, and I don't know, that's rolling around about like 1 or 2% is very minimal. And then
Yeah,
when
say 1.8% according to
yeah,
the RBA.
and then when we look at, say, you go down to the shops, you buy particularly like meat products, astronomical. And if you think about it, your unit of meat, say your chicken or your steak or whatever like that, is your meal, and it's kind of unavoidable. I guess you could probably switch to peas and rice, but for just the general living standards, you're going to stick to like a standard meat and veg kind of meal. You're stuck for options. Milk, astronomical now. Say cheese. That's all of those kind of staples have just gone up astronomically. Oil, obviously, there's been issues. It fluctuates a lot. For a lot of years, it's been down, but now that's spiked up a hell of a lot. But I mean, this is just my general assumption of me going around and spending money. It's gone up a hell of a lot, and as a consequence of that, I'm definitely sort of cutting back. I'm not going out as much. I'm sort of watching what I spend. But yeah, you could, if I heard that inflation was at, say, 15%, I wouldn't be that surprised if that was the actual real inflation rate.
Because I mean, with even with food, that's the interesting thing. Like, I wonder how many people are aware that the CPI, the consumer price index that is used to measure inflation.
Yeah.
They say that it's a constant basket of goods, and you argue an economist, and you can argue to the cows come home, and they say no, you're wrong. It's a basket of goods. It's constant, and the adjustments are only made for technological stuff and all that.
Yeah.
But I think it's absolute nonsense, because in America, they actually admit that they use something called a hedonic adjustment, which means that they will substitute goods over time. And they don't necessarily specify very clearly. So, for example, when you said that, well, when you go and buy steak or chicken in the store, and back in 2008, let's say T-bone steak was $20 a kilo.
Yeah.
And nowadays, the T-bone steak is $21, $22 a kilo. And then they would go, well, look, 10 years, prices went up 10%. What's your problem? But if you actually look at the T-bone steak that you have nowadays and the T-bone steak you used to have, and most people generally don't remember, unless through anecdotally, I think the quality of the meat has actually come down.
Yeah, and you might even get the portion sizes that get cut back as well. But you raise an interesting thing.
Yeah, with the McDonald's burgers.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting thing there. Like, the first sort of like light bulb that should sort of flick on as soon as they say the word basket. Why do they say basket? Like, what on earth are you talking about, a basket of goods? Is somebody walking around with a little shopping bag buying goods? It is a total load of crock of shit, in my opinion. Like, if you actually think of it, you could just do something very, very simple, and it would quickly work out this basket of goods. Firstly, you could just throw in there, what is the most expensive asset that anybody purchases? Because that would be a fundamental thing on the economy. And the number one most expensive asset purchase that affects most people in their life is the house price purchase. Now,
yeah, or the rent.
Yes. So considering either rent or the house price purchase is the biggest fundamental cost that comes out of the house. Obviously, there's food shopping, but let's just say that is one of the main gearing things that needs to be included in the CPI. Because if you're going to work out if there's an excess of money that's going into a speculative bubble into, say, housing, and you wanted to control that by adjusting the interest rate to solve this issue, obviously you'd want to have a good indication of what was going on there. But does it get included? No, obviously not. So this is the CPI thing is one of the biggest bugbears, and they also, it's not fixed either. It's not something that's just like set in stone, like I don't know, 2 eggs and a pint of milk and this, that, and the other. It gets adjusted. It gets adjusted to, like, say, dating sites and things like that. Things that actually get cheaper over time. So the actual inflation rate is actually just sort of like something that can be manipulated to such a degree to say that, hey, everything's cushy on this 1.8%, 1.9%, when it's totally fallible. And it goes down to the thing of like, okay, so if the CPI is not really is not a credible statistic that we can use in the economy, then why are we using that as an instrument to adjust interest rates? And then the next question comes from there. Now, if your interest rate is being adjusted according to a inflation rate which is susceptible to being manipulated, then we've got an adjustment of cost of borrowing which is going on, which is like if put it into this sense, our finances adjust our sort of our personality, our incentives and penalties and stuff like that in our lives. Now, if you're sending a message out to the public to say, hey, it's low interest rate time, you've got to go out there and spend money. Now, we could say that this is a high inflationary cycle at the moment. House prices could be in an absolute bubble, mega bubble, speculative, Ponzi schemed free-for-all. Yet there is an indicator there saying, hey, you got to spend more money because interest rates are extra low. It's absolute chaos. You're creating a chaos, like chaos in front of you. And I really would love, say, if this Royal Commission did come about, to focus on these government bodies and ask them the questions. Why are you doing this? Why are you not studying this information? Why are we using this statistics, which is so fallible, as a guidance to the nature of how we control the economy? If anything, if we didn't even have this person or this club of gentlemen who were adjusting this interest rate, we probably would have been better and just enable a situation where you have a number of borrowers and lenders coming together and deciding on what the actual interest rate is at that moment, rather than using facilities of a central banking system. You may as well just have the natural order of a free market to decide this rate, because this is the adjustment of risk. You're signalling to the market that there is literally no risk that you're going to borrow money, that you're always going to get it back in return. It's a very dangerous thing that you can put under the psychology of people, yet it happens. And I think it should be raised to the highest level, but for some reason politicians are just ignorant to it. The media doesn't really want to talk about it. You occasionally get a few articles in the news about it. You might find it on Zero Hedge, but beyond that, there's a total amnesia of the fact of what is going on.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting you bring up. There's quite a lot of points you just brought up there. I think the first one going back is to talk about the basket of goods. You know how recently we had that, I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we had the whole complaint about Woolworths and Coles milk not being milk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's ironic. We scoff at the Chinese, and I'm Asian myself. I'm from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
We scoff at the Chinese, the mainland Chinese, with their fake food, their fake milk, their fake orange, fake eggs, fake anything. And here we are. If you actually go to look at the Woolworths and Coles milk, in quotation marks, it's actually called milk isolate. And if you actually buy soy milk, for example, there's a difference between why you can buy 1 liter soy milk for, say, Black and Gold and Sanitarian brand. You pay about $1.30 to $2 a liter. But then with another brand, you actually have to pay $2.73 a liter. If you look at the ingredients, the cheapest soy milk is actually made from soy extract, so it's actually soy extract dissolved into water, and the more expensive one's actually made from whole soybeans. So your products are actually being adulterated. Let's call for what it is. It's adulterated goods that they're doing sold. We are not. A lot of people are currently eating things which they are not supposed to. It's actually not what they think it is. And so that's where we have the problem. That's why you have the CPI actually being able to register minimal price increases is because the goods itself is actually they changed the furniture right in front of our eyes without us knowing, unless you read the label. Yeah. Now with the what do you call it? You're talking also about with the government and the media. Why are they not into all this? Why are they actually willing to use flawed statistical measures and report this to people? It actually begs the question. There's a difference between accidental incompetence and deliberate incompetence, right, which is basically negligence. So you could be accidentally incompetent in terms of, well, I don't really know my statistics, so I can't tell the difference between Woolworths milk and proper dairy farmer's milk, which is made from real cow's milk rather than chemical isolated from the cow's milk and powderized and add water to it. Yeah. That's incompetence if I don't know it because I'm not a dairy farmer. And then there's deliberate incompetence, which is negligence, which is, well, I actually know, but I'm trying to get away with it because I know other people are less likely to know. So with the whole interest rate thing, on one hand, we used to, when I was a young kid in the 90s, I would watch TV and there would be bank ads that are encouraging kids to save up. We would also have ads about people should save up for their retirement. People should, the interest rates are a bit high. We also offer bonuses on savings products to encourage people to actually save. Nowadays, you watch TV, and I don't even have a TV at my place. But when I actually, unfortunately, go to people's places where the TV is on and I watch the ads with the banks, it's always about borrowing, home loan, personal loan, car loan, boat loan, whatever the hell it is. And I get all these letters to increase my freaking credit card limit. And I suddenly go, wait. We are now in this whole realm of being... The whole thing is actually, whole society is being told to do something completely different to what it was 15, 20 years ago. Yep. And most people would actually, because of amnesia about what's going on, or also the fear of actually speaking out because you could be shouted down for being a weirdo, most people actually don't point out, hey, wait, this doesn't seem right, because 15 years ago, I would actually go to a bank and they'll encourage me to open an account to increase my savings. Nowadays, I'm actually going to the bank, and every single time they're trying to get me to get some loan or something, which I can't quite afford back then. I remember the first time I got my credit card was end of second year uni. I had to go through like 4 or 5 banks before they'll let me, because they said, look, you're not making enough income and your employer isn't able to guarantee that, so I'm sorry, we can't help you. Nowadays, you actually can get someone with a pulse and they'll give you a credit card with maybe a credit limit of $22,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm sensing.
Yeah. And if you think about, like, you got to ask the question in society, why are you offering credit to somebody? Okay, it's a very basic question. And if you think about, let's just say the payday loans and say a credit card, okay, they're used to pretty much, it's basically your buying in the now. Spending. Yeah, impulse spending, buying in the now, and then you're putting off poverty in the future. Now, when it comes to, like, in a real world, if we was creating community-based banking, and we didn't really want to have impoverished people in our community, and we didn't want to do anything that was bad towards these people, If they came us and say we're a community bank, they came to us and say, look, I want a loan. I want to go on holiday, like, and take the kids away or whatever. And we say, okay, what? Yeah, okay. Like, I understand that you could probably afford and pay this loan, but it's really going to be, in general, a detriment to your life and your living standards long term. So I'm afraid we can't give you that loan. Now, I know it sounds like that. This sounds like crazy. Like in today's age, that will be just sort of granted, and yeah, you've got the creditworthiness, tick tick tick, boom, you've got it. It's not even. It's all automated now. It doesn't even matter about that. But there's no
We
force.
even fudge your creditworthiness
Yeah,
if we need to.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's no sort of. I doubt very much that with loan approvals, they ever ask the question, "What do you need this loan for?" Okay. Now, in a different circumstance, this is where most loans should be used. Okay. Say if you come to the community bank and said, "Look, I'm trying to work on this product. I don't know. I'm building widgets or whatever. I'm trying to build this factory, and I need a loan to increase the capacity of this factory. Would you mind it?" Now, this is a productive asset which is going to enable that person to produce more. Now, that's pretty much where 90% of all loans or funding from the capital pool of the community should be going. Now, you could argue that, okay, well, yeah, but you don't have enough money to like buy a house outright. So yeah, there is a caveat that you can use loans to purchase long-term life-improving assets, but obviously that these all come under certain circumstances. It's got to improve the life, your life and your family's life for a long-term guided view. Now, if it's not doing any of those circumstances above, like productive asset or productive enhancements or long-term family improving, then it shouldn't be a loan. It's simple as that.
Yeah. Actually, that's the interesting thing when you said like loans should be made for um, investment in productive assets. That comes down to a fundamental question, and perhaps even you and I might see differently on this. Would you consider residential property to be a productive asset?
It's not a productive asset. It's, as I say, it goes down to a category of just being a long-term life improving asset. So if it comes under, like, if you can afford this loan to purchase a house and it's not going to it's not going to really put you into a massive impoverished position. So say if I try to buy a $3 million house, it's going to cost me too much money. It's going to be a burden on me. I'm probably going to get wiped out as soon as interest rates rise. So this is going to end in failure, kind of thing. However, if I bought an apartment or a house, if I could buy a house, which I think house prices really should be about, I don't know, 500,000 really. If I bought a house for 500,000, it's affordable if interest rates, if the bond market blows up and interest rates spike up to 10%, then things are just about manageable, and I can control that expenditure for a long-term view. And I own this asset until the end, and I can potentially use that asset to give as a gift to my family or use it for my elderly care. But that asset is obviously not anything to do with production. It's very little to do with production, but it is in the realms of improving lives. Now, say for example, if everybody had no ability to get loans for houses and all you had is a situation where people just had the spare cash that were on them, then the capacity of new builds would just be completely diminished. But maybe we'll be quite inventive of how we'd release land, because land is the most important factor when it comes to the expense of a house. The majority of all the expenses go into the actual land value. That would obviously take a massive whack, which would probably be quite a good thing if we didn't have all this speculative Ponzi financing in the housing market. That would dramatically drop. But there is obviously materials and goods and stuff like that, and people will not really be able to have the capacity to, even after, I don't know, 10 years of saving, they probably wouldn't even be able to muster out. The majority of people, let's just say, I don't know, you could probably muster up about 200,000 after 10 years if you're earning fairly good money and you're putting you're really just like eating rice and peas every day kind of thing. But that's kind of like the feasible area of what things could happen. But I'm always bringing myself back to that point. Productive lending is the number one factor. Much below that is the factor of life improving assets and stuff that is affordable, but it should never turn into something that's a speculative free for all. Now you could say that if that person's buying the house and they're using it to be a landlord and they're renting out that property, then you could argue that that's a productive asset. Or if they're building these hotels, they're turning that into a productive asset for tourism, and that does, you could say as an aggregate, that does improve the living standards for all in that community and other communities as well. But every loan, every aspect of life should be for the long-term goal. But we live in this very quick sort of turnaround lifestyle where CEOs switch from one corporation to another. We have politicians that change around every 3-year term. There's nobody that takes ownership of a business, takes it from the ground and builds it up and takes full responsibility for something. Everything is now in the moment and postponed for the future. But I think we're coming to that stage right now where the chickens are coming home to roost.
Actually, I thought I might go and give it a go with my first principles understanding of this whole property bubble. Yeah. Now, I actually believe that the current property prices is not driven by so much by land, but by the availability of currency. And I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about currency and credit, because that's actually what we're operating on.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't understand the basic time value of money, which is the price of anything is the present value of the future cash flows that something generates, and is discounted by a interest rate plus a risk premium. And the risk premium is based on, well, how likely is that cash which you think you're going to make will vary, and how far down the track you actually take to get it back. So with interest rates falling, yep, prices of assets of anything is going to go up. Now, when it comes to the median Australian property price, and I actually got this from RP data, which is not, well, I got logged into it, and even the ABS doesn't have it. They only have the property prices for the 8 major cities. In fact, we should later check the Australian Bureau of Statistics because they are supposed to have released the March quarter residential property index today.
Yep.
Now, the median Australian property price is actually $500,000. The Sydney property price, the median house price is about $1 million, over $1 million, I think 1.1 million, and units are about 900,000.
Yep.
And you were saying that like land prices drive the property price, and I was going, if you actually look at the currency, availability of currency and credit.
Just to correct myself there, it's not the land price that drives the actual market. It's not really anything to do with that. It's to do with the availability of credit. I agree with you on that fact. I was just saying that the biggest component of the valuation of buying a property is the land, because if you just take it down, like if you're going to just build a house from scratch, the land component is the most expensive, and actually building the house won't cost as much as the actual land factor. It'll be like, I think it'll be less than 50%, I would say, on average.
Yeah, actually, thanks for clarifying. So even the land price itself is actually distorted because of currency and credit.
Yes. Because
there is just too much. So our economic definition of inflation, what the official definition of inflation is actually incorrect. The official definition of economic inflation is the excess in the growth of currency or money relative to the growth of goods and services for which the money or currency is placed, like it's being used to buy this. So when you actually grow, so inflation shouldn't just actually, they're reflected as price because it's observable. Now with the property price, the average Sydney house price is 1.1 million and units about 900,000, and the average Sydney individual income is about 85,000.
Right.
So what we're actually seeing is about 12, 13 years of average pre-tax income. And I think a more realistic valuation of property is actually about 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, 4 to 5
pre-tax income,
and that just sort of, and that says that well, in an environment where we're coming up to where the bond market is going to potentially, well, let's just say, for example, where there has been loads of quantitative easing, where the market has been flooded.
The currency.
Yeah, let's just say with currency, for example. Now we're going into from QE, quantitative easing, to quantitative tightening, and then it comes to the rounds when the Treasury, the US, the Treasuries get sold out to the financial market, and when they were doing the purchases for themselves, they're using basically the credit cards to pay their bills. When they were doing it, everything was going fine, and now it's all been tightened up to a ratchet degree. Then we're going to get an interest rate spike. Now, at the same time that we're getting this interest rate spike, we're looking at what you're saying, 13 times average household income, or not household, individual income. Let's just say
individual income. Yeah, that's right.
So we've got such a debt burden, or let's just say people who have got into this thinking, hey, I only have to pay this much because interest rates are so low. This is fantastic. Getting into this nice big house and then thinking they've made it, and then all of a sudden around the corner they've already noticed that their house this year, for the last 6 months, say the interest rates, the property's gone down by 100,000. Say it was like 1.1, now it's 1 million now, and then they're going to come very maybe towards the end of this year. There's going to be a yield shock, I think. There's going to be a point in which interest rates have to rise. And it's an unavoidable thing where Australian banks have to seek funding from overseas. They don't make it. They can't do the loan to borrower books domestically because they have to go to foreign funding for that. So you've got this double whammy effect. You've got the 13-time leverage. That you've got no wiggle room for manoeuvre when it comes to interest rates. You've got a potential massive interest rate event on the horizon, and people totally over leveraged, and it's asking for so much trouble when that all clicks in. And the problem is, there isn't any particular easy way out of this situation. You're going to find a lot of families who have bought into the Australian dream who are going to literally hit the skids. And you think, okay, all right, well, maybe that's bad. Okay, you got these people that are over leveraged, all right, and the interest rates go up, and maybe they get bankrupt. So what? But then this has the knock-on effect. Australian economy, especially seeing that we're on the eastern border. What's the economy over here? It's all, I don't know, real estate, banking. It's all these, I don't know, universities. It's all the stuff that's not necessarily that. It doesn't need to be that much of a big part of the economy because it's not the productive side of the economy. Your production is the most important side of the economy. Now, you could say for the Western Australia's gone, there is some productive things which are going on there, but you're creating not only this first whammy effect of basically the leverage going, which has been rising up, and the credit expansion, which has been going so high compared to earnings. You're going to get the interest rate shock, then you're going to get the unemployment shock. And I don't quite know, and I don't have all the answers to where people are going to find redemption for this.
That's a good point. Where are they going to find redemption when they hit the proverbial brick wall, pun intended, or when basically the whole house falls, the whole house caves into them. Yeah. I actually just looked at the ABS release of the residential property index, and the median house price in Sydney is now $905,000 for the month, which is down from $945,000 in the same time last year, and compared to last quarter, December, which was 1.031 million. So that's actually a pretty big drop.
Yeah, and it's official, even basically.
It's what it's about 12. It's about 10% drop.
Yeah.
Although people would say you got to do the adjustments, yada yada yada. That's a funny thing I also want to talk about in terms of statistics, is this whole people seem to not understand statistics, and therefore the powers that be are able to use statistics to hoodwink people. You could actually use the same set of statistics and dress it up. So with the same data, the ABS reports that the Sydney house price has dropped they said like 0.7% year on year. And no, they say in here the residential property price index fell 1.2% over the quarter December to March, even though the median price has fallen 10%. And then they say, but year on year, Sydney prices have actually risen by, no, they didn't say it rose. It fell by 0.5% over the year.
It wouldn't have surprised me, but yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So basically you can actually report the same set of statistics in a really flattering manner in order to make people not worry about what's really going on. And when it comes to banks, what the term credit basically is supposed to be similar to the word trust. And nowadays, trust is being thrown around, and it's cheap. It is so cheap that basically it's worthless. And I find it also interesting when people go, house prices went up, and I almost now have to correct people in saying, no, what you have in your wallet is worth less. The house hasn't actually gone anywhere because it's still the house, and all it's happening is you need more of the notes, the plastic notes in your wallet, and you got to work more hours to get that same thing.
Yeah.
Your labor has become cheaper. Your wealth is actually being slowly, it's slowly melting away. And if people actually look at it from that perspective, I think there will be many people who will be losing sleep at night, and they would actually not be as gung-ho as they currently are. Yeah. And I think when you said, where will people find redemption? I personally think people are not willing to listen about or take advice unless they need it. Yeah. And currently the whole view in society is, I don't need advice from anyone because I've got, my mortgage is fine, I've got a job, I'm able to upgrade my Toyota Corolla into a BMW 3 Series because my house price went up. I'm able to send my kids to private school. I can upgrade to the latest notebook every 6 months to a year. I've got the newest phone. I've got my Netflix. They're so drowned in this comfort that if you actually talk to them, you actually ask them, what's the state of your finances? They'll go, I'm fine. And if you go, have you ever thought of what would happen when things turn around? You actually offend them. And these days, the whole term offense is actually like, it's the biggest blasphemous term these days in the Western society.
Yeah,
is actually offense.
Yeah, well,
I'm offended.
I know you're a Christian, and this is one of the things that I think it does connect to. I'm obviously I'm aware of Christianity, and I've sort of been raised around it. I wouldn't say that I'm a practicing Christian by any means, but I have to say the merits of Christianity in times like these. You've got a sense of community there. Some people that you can depend on. What have you got as an average Australian when the thing is, right, when a situation like this happens, okay, all the most dependable pillars of your world start to crash. So the people that you thought were doing so well and going on a holiday, they quickly turn around and they've got nothing.
Yeah.
I will go so far as to say, and I know, like it sounds like
Go for it.
but you can't depend on the government for these things in these situations either.
Absolutely.
You can only and all these people that you may know and sort of like lightly friend and they're friends on your Facebook. You can't depend on these people either. It really boils down to your neighbours, the people you know, your close family, real like best friends. These people are going to be the one, and obviously a lot of it comes down to your own personal choices, what kind of choices that you're making, how you're monitoring your financial affairs, your cash flows. What is your plan B? What is your plan C? What is your plan D in this situation? How are you going to get around? How are you going to tiptoe around these problems that are going to happen? Because things don't just sort of things don't happen in isolation. I know that sometimes people do go bankrupt in isolation, but we're looking at systemic problems. We're not looking at this time that this is just sort of Bob down the road, he's going through difficulty. This is everyone's going to be up shit creek at the same time. So it's not like I'm saying everyone go down to your church now, but it's just you do need to be wary of these things, and you do need to talk to your neighbours. You do need to the ultimate basics of everyone says about the how economics start is about treating people in kind, and this is one of the root causes of where I come from. My arguments is that you can evaluate every single economic component to your life. It doesn't necessarily need to be just this primal thing of fiat currency that we exchange with each other. There is a multi-tiered number of values and expressions which are going through. If you think of what all language is purely a medium of emotion which is transferred. Money is purely a medium of emotion that's transferred as well. Obviously it does have outliers of things that provide for us and give us sustenance and survival, but that all root causes back into our actual emotional being in itself. So this is why, to bring it back, people just need to take a couple of steps back and see themselves where they are right now and look at the picture and see how things play out. I've always been of this mindset. I don't know why I'm such a weirdo that I've always been looking at this. I think sometimes I have tried to live a bit of a hedonistic life before and gone out partying and boozing and stuff like that, but it's still in the back of my mind. I've always thought to myself, it comes from a sort of a point where I say to myself, well, I'm not fully confident in all my abilities. I do feel like I have flaws, and sometimes life can give you a bad hand and you can really be up against the wall. And from that mentality of going through failures and being a failure and striving forward no matter what happens to me, I do have to have that sort of forward-looking, overarching sort of overview of what's going on, what's coming down the road, and what's going to hit me eventually. And that's why I've sort of been preparing myself in such a way to say, okay, well, let's do this, let's do that, let's make connections, let's do these kind of things, let's buy these assets. And I think, I think if I'm not telling people what to do, but it's just the fact that it's just to educate yourself in these matters is going to put you in the best stead. Now, I just now I've sorry, I'm going off in my own crazy little tangent there, but one thing that I really wanted you to talk about, because your videos, one of your videos I really enjoyed, as you dissected it much better than what I have before, is the auction clearance rate. That beautiful statistic that I still really do not understand why that's got much to do with the valuation of a house. But I'm sure I'll let you have a go at that.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting with the auction clearance rate. What the official rate you get is actually doesn't correspond with if you are a real estate agent with RP data. And I only just realized that after a friend of mine gave me the ability to actually log on to RP data. So if you go to auhouseprices.com, you will be able to see the auction clearance rates in the 8 major cities in Australia. And for the most recent weekend, the auction clearance rate in Sydney was reported to be 57%, with 593 properties listed, 320 reported, and 225 sold. It's still a mystery to me as to what this whole thing is. The reason why they reported, to my understanding, is that they used that headline figure as a means to say this is the amount of activity in the property market, and they used to actually use this as a way to say to people, hey, look, market's doing really well, lots of people are buying, and there's a shortage in supply, so you better jump in or you'll miss the boat.
Yeah.
But nowadays, this very same auction clearance rate is not encouraging to them anymore, because it's fallen from in the past being like 80% to less than 60%. And I dare say a lot of real estate agents don't go and report their activity if it doesn't go well for them. I suspect that this data is phony.
Yeah.
So typically logically you'd say auction clearance rate would be 225 divided by 593, based on the 16th of June 2018, and that would be like 40-something%, except the auction clearance rate is 57%. And apparently if you go to RP data, they have the statistics, they have the property statistics, I think, by about Wednesday after the weekend. So the 57% is apparently the 57% for the previous week, ending the 9th of June. So they're actually reporting rubbish here. And if I didn't have login data for RP, if I didn't get login for RP data, I wouldn't have known. But even then, people just can't get access to that data unless you are inside the industry, unless you're an insider. And that is exactly the same thing, a lot of the government statistics. And I might even go back and say, with the CPI data, when I went into the Australian Bureau of Statistics and got the raw CPI data,
yeah,
I still suspect that there's something wrong with those data. I still reckon they're adopted. But they're at least broken down into the key components. So you can actually see food prices, and food prices are inflating at about, they say it inflates at 4%, I think 4% per annum. Healthcare cost is going up by about 6% per annum, and so is education costs. That makes more sense to me, except then the official headline figure, which they're supposed to weight everything and make adjustments, that's why they got the 1.8%, which makes no sense.
Yep.
I suspect the same thing happens with property data. And that worries me, because people have been given the impression from the media and the government that they are missing the boat, and that's why they got to borrow in order to go and spend. And they have so little financial education when they go to school. They may understand. You have some people who are quite good at mathematics graduating from high school, They can do their trigonometry, they can do their conics and integration and calculus, but you actually go and ask them to manage their finances, they actually probably can't. And am I speaking off the top of my head? Am I making this up? No, I personally was someone like that. The only thing that got me to build up my own savings was when I started working in a pharmacy. I remember there was a sales pitch on a skincare product called Imodine, and we were taught to say to customers, for the price of a cup of coffee a day, you could have beautiful skin. And I twisted that around in my mind and go, if I save up $50 a week, I have $2,600. And if I have the power of compound interest, then that is going to accumulate me quite a bit. That's actually why I saved. I could have learned that in 4-year maths. They should have taught me this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And yet they purposely don't. They made mortgage repayments into a really convoluted mathematical formula on series and sequences that I had to go to university, and they drew a diagram and showed me this is how cash works, and at different times you've got to move it forwards and backwards. And I go, why don't they do that in school? Exactly. Why don't they just teach this to people? And that's where all this suspicion come in. It's like, so when you went back to the thing about statism, like the whole reliance on the government, that it's exactly right. The fact that people have been told everything is fine, and that the media tells you want the government to reduce interest rates so people are going to have a lower burden of borrowing. You want the government to cut taxes on middle class on middle Australia. You want the government to raise taxes on the rich people because they're the ones exploiting you. I'm going, shit. I left Hong Kong because I was worried about communist China taking over Hong Kong. I come here and they're actually building up around me a Marxist environment without me knowing. And all this time I was going, yeah, we're a nice capitalist democratic nation. I'm glad to be Australian. I'm proud to be Australian, mind you, but I'm going, I don't think the schools are teaching me to be a proud Australian anymore. The governments and the banks are actually buttering people up so that the very people who cause the problems are the ones that what I offensively call the sheeple, the uninformed, ignorant masses, are going to run to straight into the wolf's mouth because they've not been taught any better. And it worries me because, especially when I'm teaching in university, that I now have I sense this moral sense of maybe I should speak up and warn some of my students and perhaps get in trouble along the way. I actually have gotten warnings from my colleagues, and some students have complained that there are things which I say which are controversial, but I go through it. I now have a caveat to my students. I say, you pay to be here, I get paid to be here. And I also tell them a bit about this whole upside down world where things don't seem to add up. And I go, one day I'm going to annoy someone in here so much that they're going to complain and I'm going to lose my job. But don't worry, because I don't have liability and I get my bills paid. And thank God for that I was able to understand all this so that I can actually say this I don't have someone actually forcing me to go against my own integrity to speak the truth. And I think that's also why you have in our society increasing amounts of bullshit statistics and bullshit narratives in the news. Is because I reckon a lot of journalists, they know, a lot of government officials, they know, but they know the truth, but they can't speak it because they've got so much liabilities, they've got so much that the governments and the banks have on them, whether it's a mortgage or dirty deals that they've made, that it's like, you got to talk you got to dance to my tune and you're going to make everyone else dance to our tune.
Yeah. Well, you think about it in the sense that if anybody, say if somebody was working in the media, they've obviously amassed a number of debts just to get their degrees, and now they're earning the money, but then now they're being said, okay, well, you could only ask people these kind of questions, and shouldn't go there with that kind of thing. There's the basic, it's a self-censorship which is happening from every single level. But I think it even roots down to when kids go into primary school. I think censorship is happening even at those levels. There's nobody that's really there who can speak freely. And people that speak freely, what we're trying to do here, it doesn't happen in day-to-day life and work, and people you can't crack people down to this level that often unless you'd have a couple of beers with them. You get to a quiet area of a room or something like that, then you can talk about this stuff, but it's very rare that you get to this level. Now, just one note on the clearance rates. When it came to that again, when you get this word clearance rates, what the hell does clearance rates mean? You got to think.
I think clearance rates, what they're trying to imply is how many properties are put on auction that are sold. So then that's how many properties were cleared.
Yeah.
Except it's this concocted statistic that it has as much meaning as a $3 note in our currency system.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I think it's all there for the pump. Everything's there for the pump.
It's a herd mentality.
Yeah, so if you think
it's a whole FOMO psychology.
Yeah, and if you think about the auction, an environment of an auction, really, you can tell it works while there's a number of bidders there. It can help to really pump the situation. But in the absence of, say, you've only got one bidder left, it looks totally diabolical. But as a backdrop to this, you've got the clearance rate, which is a statistic which isn't compulsory. It's something that could be omitted if the person who's running the auction doesn't choose to want to announce that to the market. So it's got a double effect. It's got the effect of clearance rates are at 90%. Everything's fantastic. But at the same time, when things aren't getting cleared and things are getting passed in, then at the same time, you've got the effect of, I won't announce that to the general statistics. So yeah, it's a fantastic method to say to the people, to signal to unsuspecting buyers into the housing market, green light, get involved. Things are clearing. Yeah. This housing market is shifting so quickly. You can turn over your house fast, and you can make a decent profit. It's all green lights which are shining to unsuspecting sheeple, as you may say. So this is one of those.
It's Orwellian.
Yeah.
For want of a better word.
Yeah, double speak and what is up is down. There is those factors. Now, I just want to, because obviously we talk in two different senses. We're so used to talking about the market as being this pumped machine, but I do have to sort of correct myself. You talked about statistics just recently, how the market is going down. So even for us, our psychological state still is in the mindset of the pump cycle. But I do think that the actual everything runs around, or as I say, emotion is basically the thing that fuels all of these markets and the movements. And I think the emotion is interesting to analyze at this point, with the fact that have you ever heard of the 5 stages of grieving before?
I think I have. Is it somewhere along the lines of you have initially there's shock, then there's sadness, then there's anger and denial,
yeah,
and then finally there's acceptance, and then there's recovery, somewhere along the line of that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think if I remember correctly, it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. And I think that the first stage is definitely almost past now, the denial point where people say, no, house prices always go up. They're going to never. Okay, well, I can sit out of the market and then I can come back in and then it's going to be fine. But a 10% drop is a total slap round the face to people. It's not just like, I can sit this one out and wait a bit. This is like, I'm in an investment property. I've got a number of investment properties geared into this investment property, and I've had a 10% correction to all of them, all at the same time. This ain't something that you can just sit and wait on the sidelines before you can, and get back in when the market pumps up again. You need a 15% turnaround to put a smile back on your face again. So people maybe...
That's called a seagull's paradox, by the way, for those listeners who are interested in that particular phenomenon, whereas if something drops, you need a higher percentage to get back.
Yeah. So people are just in that state of shock, and I think that's happened, and I think it's just about to pass right now, where people think, oh, no, house prices are down 10%. But now I think that we're at this kind of anger stage. I think people are putting...
The Royal Commission.
You've got that. You've got that as a... There is a number of aspects, actually. You're right on that sense. The Royal Commission, the outbursting of the public. How could this happen? How could the banks be absent-minded to these things? I'm sure the property investors and people who are trying to sell their house right now, they're probably absolutely going livid at their real estate agents. Why aren't you shifting this house? Why is it taking you so much time? I can guarantee if you could listen to the phone calls right now, they will be effing and blinding at them right now. So I definitely think we have to be at that anger stage right now. Obviously, some people are a bit slower than other people, but I think we're just on that edge of the anger stage, and the bargaining stage happens shortly after that. But at the same time, as I say, even though obviously I talk about the interest rates rise,
but it hasn't really hit yet. Actually, I'm of the view that this is kind of like more the surreal movie moment where the music suddenly stops as you see the main character stand in front of a car, and it's about to hit them. So
everything goes in slow motion.
I think we're in the slow motion of the train wreck ahead rather than it's actually hit. So that I'm not sure about the denial stage. It might be denial stage for a number of people who are actually the more distressed borrowers,
of course.
Especially the ones the Four Corners were talking about. In last September, there was actually a Four Corners episode which talked about the housing bubble and parts of Western Australia, so the Margaret River region in Western Australia, and somewhere I think in the east, just in the eastern outskirts of Brisbane, there are people who basically lost their house and everything, and they're near retirees. So so they're starting to air these types of. So you do have some people, but it hasn't gone. I would say it hasn't gone mainstream yet. We haven't actually been. We haven't hit the rock moment yet.
Yeah, if we grabbed, I don't know, a number of people off the street and said, where do you see house prices going next year? I think even today, I would say close to 80% would say up, wouldn't you?
I'll probably say about 60% about 50 to 60% would say it's up.
Yeah, maybe
I think
because
I think 80% of them would say, even if they say it will drop, they'll say that this is temporary. So I'll give the 80% on. It'll always be a but is going to reach some plateau whereby.
Yeah, because I went to a birthday party, like a kid's birthday party, and I heard them all talking about property and how it's all expensive. They're talking like the conversations I would hear 6 months ago, and it seemed like they were all sort of agreeing that house prices always go up, and they sound like I'm reading all the news and I'm reading all the articles all the time, so I'm just so current in the events that when I went to that environment and everyone's talking about how expensive housing property is and you got to get involved and if you don't do it early, you're going to miss out. It seemed to be on that kind of conversation sort of style, and that was only about a month ago. So maybe things may have changed and people are catching up a bit now, and maybe they all sort of wanted to agree with each other because it was a birthday environment. I don't know really, but it seemed like with me just taking a tap into that kind of that environment, it seemed like people were still way behind the curve of what's going on. Now, people that are just listening to us conversating right now, they're way into it, so they understand it as much as we do. But I think it's still, if you take little samples of people that are outside of the financial real estate market and everything else, and maybe they're not too interested in watching like Four Corners, they're still going to be of that mentality to say, yeah, next year prices will go up, I think. But yeah, not to dwell on things. I mean, I'm just talking from an armchair. I haven't got the broad statistics of how people feel, but it's just a factor which, going back to the point of emotion. Emotion is the driver, the instigator, and the driver of how things start to trickle down. And there are people that are way ahead of the curve. There's like people like you and me who foresee this kind of situation, and we're sitting at the sidelines waiting for it to happen. And there's a lot of Australians like that as well. And then there's the people that are sort of in the motions, and there's people that are just have got no clue and never seen and have never sort of picked up any article and read about any of this kind of stuff. They haven't found any interest in it. But now they're going to find themselves into a situation where they're forced to find out. But it's going to be rammed into their face, really, because it's going to be such a problem in the scope of most Australians.
But the articles I've also seen recently in the mainstream media, which, for example, news.com.au at the end of May had an article that was talking about 10 myths. It was something along the lines of something like 10 things that people should know about the upcoming economic Armageddon in Australia. And I was like, I almost fell off my chair when I saw that article, and I was standing up, by the way. I almost fell off my chair standing up. It just goes to show. And I was reading that article and I was going, that's the type of stuff which you and I are talking about, and it's coming into the mainstream. And
people won't actually. People will read it, and then I think it'll just switch off. The mind will switch off. It won't.
It's predictive programming.
Yeah,
it's predictive programming. It's that you're primed up to actually go, when it hits you, you go, yeah, actually, I vaguely remember this a while back, and I ignored it. And they'll be kicking their own asses by then, rather than pointing at the government and the banks and the media for having kept it away from them for a long time. So they would end up blaming themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think some people I think majority of people know that things ain't that great, even if they don't read into this and they don't read financial news and all that kind of stuff. People know that things aren't that great. But
they can feel it in the bank account, and also in the fact that they can't really spend as much as they used to.
Yeah,
that's for sure. They are feeling the squeeze,
and they surely should remember if anybody's in there, as long as they're about, I don't know, as long as they're in their mid-20s, they should recall what happened last time when the last financial crisis happened, and
we fell over it though.
Yeah.
I think you had to actually at least be 45 in order to experience the last proper recession we had in Australia, which was the early 1990s, around the time Paul Keating said the recession we had to have, and also the one which just happened at the turn of the 1989-1990. I think that was only real proper recession we had in Australia.
Yeah.
So no, 10 years ago, I wouldn't think that people would have felt much. we had the stimulus and the money investment to keep us going.
Yeah. But I don't think...
Actually, one thing which sorry, keep going.
No. If you're going to continue, I was going to go on a tangent there.
Oh yeah, because one thing I want to explore with you is this particular line of thinking that it triggered me. I'll admit to that, because I had a rather heated conversation with a good friend of mine, and he said that, look, the property prices are not going to drop because the government and the banks can't afford to let it drop. And if it does actually drop anywhere like near 5 to 10%, you have the lefty government, basically the ALP, taking power over Northern Turnbull. And then the lefty government is going to let in immigration, and immigration is going to keep property prices going up. They're also going to have to reduce interest rates. So if the RBA ever raises interest rates to crash the market, they will eventually have to drop the interest rate because they can't let this whole thing fail. So if you can't let this whole thing fail, then all this whole idea that there will be hyperinflation is you can hyperinflate away, but it doesn't matter because all you have to do is to just go and borrow to invest and try to stay positively geared. And this went on. We had this conversation back and forth for about 2 hours. It was on WhatsApp, so that's the reason why it could last 2 hours. Because if it was a face-to-face conversation, I'm sure it would have been on the newspaper somewhere that two men are in hospital because they're hospitalized for serious head injury, whatever. Because I was my wife was sitting next to me when I was typing away, and she could see my face virtually turn red as I was typing away and explaining to my friend that if this whole thing, if hyperinflation could be so easily solved by lefty governments reducing interest rates and getting immigration in, there would not have been a Great Depression. We would not have Weimar Germany being in a disaster. Yeah, and then leading to Nazi Germany. You wouldn't have Zimbabwe collapsing as it has. You wouldn't see Venezuela. And it goes, no, but like, for the life of me, I don't know what that whole reason is. He believes that this is the whole thing about the normalcy bias. The whole belief that because of the whole progressive movement wanting immigration, they're going to prop this whole thing up. Immigrants, even if they can't afford it, government is going to allow this affordable housing to continue. So therefore, rather than let the government have the housing to lend it to, then rent to people and they make money, why don't I go and borrow and do it? It all sounds really plausible, right? If you're listening, but can you tell me, does that make your blood kind of start? Does it make your heart flutter a bit, increase your heart rate when you hear that type of reasoning? Where is the fault, or is there none?
Of course, there's a number of issues with that. The fact that but the fact that you can see that he's like turning it into a pantomime of the conductor pulling the cords of the puppets and opening the gates to immigration to solve all these issues, but it doesn't solve any of the issues. You're just basically destroying living standards. Or if you're opening the gates to immigration and you haven't, it's not helping with. You're actually creating more competition anyway, for starters, for the economy. Not for the economy, for the people. So high immigration levels has always been a situation which has helped corporations because that can drive down wages because people...
Yeah, there's greater offer, there's greater hard labor.
Yeah. Now, saying that if you increase the immigration, that's going to increase the amount of people that are purchasing properties. It makes sense on a very sort of top-down level. But the fact is that when you're driving the population growth into the economy, still the local banking sector has a certain level of credit which is got available as a leverage point from the deposits that are actually in the banking savings to actually give out to the general public. It's a per capita basis. So even as you increase the population, that new population may not even be that wealthy, is probably actually going to reduce the per capita availability of funds that can be lent out to the general public. The only reason why house prices have been increasing over the time is the fact that there's been a multiple of 13 times average income. That is this credit availability, as Steve Keen always has mentioned, and I totally agree with him on this factor. The credit availability has been the key driver of the actual house price inflation. So immigration hasn't had even a significant degree of effect on the actual house prices. Just out of curiosity,
actually, with the credit, I'm not sure whether I heard of your channel or I heard of another channel. Apparently, the fractional reserve banking is a lie, and they say that banks are able to create credit without any currency. So that's actually why they've been able to do it as they have. And so therefore, I think this is the type of where my friend would say, therefore the banks can issue unlimited credit, and if they are on the verge of bankruptcy because of too much leverage, the government is going to come in. And I think the thing that breaks his logic is what you say is the reduction of the general wealth of the population. Now, I also agree that partly what he says is that if you invest in property or whatever, you're to stay ahead. Like even if the general living standards is going to fall, you could still be one of the small percentage who make it. But that then comes down to this thing I was reading by Nasser Taylor called Skin in the Game. Great book. I recommend people read it.
Yeah.
And there's this part called ergodicity. And the term ergodicity, I'll explain it really in simple terms. There's something called ensemble probability and time probability. Ensemble probability could be explained as if you have 100 people going to a casino, let's say one person out of the 100 will go bankrupt. So therefore, the likelihood of any individual getting bankrupt going to a casino on a particular day is 1%. Correct. So therefore, people believe that you could say, okay, if I go to a casino on any particular day, I have a chance of bankruptcy of 1%. But if I go to a casino and just play every single day, on a particular day I'm bankrupt, there is no tomorrow. And I think that's the thing which I think the people have this whole problem of is they mistaken the ensemble probability with the time probability. That you actually, to be able to play in the game, you got to survive first. And a lot of people don't realize that they are the ones who are not going to survive even if the group survives. It doesn't matter if the group survives. If you don't survive, you go bankrupt, you're gone. And people have leveraged themselves all the way up, and banks have allowed them to do this. Very much so to the point where individuals are all going to a casino not knowing that now the risk of it is like 50%, 20% bankruptcy. So therefore, you go into a casino, you're not facing a 1% chance of bankruptcy anymore. You're facing 20%. And they've mistaken everything. And I think that's people don't realize that even if the government manages to inflate their way out, they might not be the ones who survive by the time the government actually comes in and goes, yeah, I'm going to reduce interest rate and we're going to hyperinflate to oblivion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see things playing out then? So if your mate was coming up with those ideas of bringing in, open the doors to immigration, all that kind of stuff, how do you, let's just say we're getting into 2019, 2020, the shit is hitting the fan. How do you see the things panning out from this point onwards?
I actually think that the whole belief of immigration is going to solve the problem is, again, it's the normalcy bias. So, okay, 20 years ago, people in South America, which was the richest country in South America? Venezuela, right?
Right.
So back then, if you're a South American, you probably want to go to Venezuela. Let's say you couldn't go, if you could only choose to go to a country in South America, to go to Venezuela. So yeah, immigration to Venezuela at that time would be okay. Same with America. People are immigrating into America because it's a land of the free, there's land of opportunity, blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, apparently in certain parts of America, especially in San Francisco, people are trying to get the hell out. So therefore, the whole idea of if Sydney becomes a shithole, immigration is going to solve this problem, because we've had in the past people immigrating to Sydney because it's a great place. But no, if the economy is screwed over, if our financial sector comes down in a heap, then it's similar to Detroit back when they shut down all those car making factories.
Yeah.
What do you want people immigrating here for? What? So that you could roam with, you could hang out with roaming dogs, dog packs in abandoned streets because people have moved out if they could. So I'm going, makes no sense. Like this is this whole people look at things they look at the dynamics in the first order, that you toggle one variable in this whole economy and only that variable moves. But by moving that variable, they forget that everything else moves along with it.
Yeah.
So no, if Sydney property comes down, we're going to see a lot of people lose their jobs. We're going to see a lot more shops shutting down, and there'll be shopping centers that are going to start looking like Minto shopping center 15 years ago. Yeah. And if you got conditions like that, why in the world would there be people moving here, and why would the more intelligent and better off people in Sydney not move out to another city to enjoy the lifestyle that they used to have that they can't have here? I remember I asked an ex-colleague of mine who came from South Africa about 16 years ago. I asked him, actually, why do you come to why do you move to South Africa to Sydney? It's always in South Africa. He said that, well, it came to a stage where within a year, he attended 4 funerals of people that he knew, young people who were murdered or were killed because they got mugged in a mugging and all that. And he goes, well, we decided not to stay here, especially after one of my family members got robbed in a break and enter. So, I mean, when we say this, people are going to find it disgusting that a Sydney sider is going to say this about Sydney. But could it happen? What's there to say that there isn't? Like, what is special about Sydney that no other city that has gone through a property crisis didn't go through? So,
of course,
I don't believe that when the economy comes down, you can save it. So that's why I am actually I'm not going to settle comfortably in Sydney, so that when we actually see shit coming, when we actually do hit the end of Shit Creek, I actually don't need a paddle to paddle. I'm actually going to get off the canoe and start walking. So maybe move to another city or in the countryside.
Yeah.
Because we'll be safer.
Of course. I think most people have got that mentality anyway. I mean, I see things panning out in a sense that you've got obviously the banks have lent out far too much money to people that are not that credit worthy. Let's just put that one out there. You've got basically all the quantitative back from 2008 crisis. We've got all that problem that we try to put off by pumping the system with more credit. That's all coming home now, and the interest rates have to rise in a very furious way. that's going to smash the market. You're going to get people that basically you're going to get people that are defaulting on their loans. Now, with a bank, operationally, a bank operates bankrupt because they have to continuously balance the book between the assets that they're borrowing to, lending to, compared to how many assets they've got borrowings. Now, if it comes to the fact that they have to make write-offs when a balance sheet of a bank is very different to what it is of a normal business, but because their loans are actually assets, it's like the opposite way around. But if you do get a situation where you get a pure write-off, the asset just literally gets written off the actual balance sheet, then you do have a very dangerous circumstance where there's not enough assets compared to deposits. Deposits like almost like a liability for a bank. And then eventually it comes to a point where people forget about these things of bank runs. Banks can be run on, but generally you'll get the sort of the Lehman crisis where people, the banks who are operating around the other banks, they won't lend to each other. So you get the credit crisis that happens with Lehman's.
And then everyone wants to sell, and there's no one to sell to that
of course
at the price that they're wanting to sell. So that's actually what's starting to happen in the property market in our neighborhood. Is that by the way, are you aware that there's actually more properties put on sale than you would think? And do you know how?
How they do that?
A lot of properties don't have a for sale sign, but they're actually still on the market for sale, and you might occasionally see on a weekday a small little sign saying open house, 12:30, coming for inspection.
Yeah.
There are houses that have been on the market for 200 days.
Doesn't surprise me. And going on to that fact, once we get to the next step of like, okay, these banks are coming back, they need liquidity, they need funding, they need credit straight away. You've got the apparatus of APRA who could step in and they can use say if their defaults and the banks need to be broken up, you need them to step in, and you need them to protect savings, for example. But it becomes a lot bigger than what it is, because the amount of write-offs are so dramatic to a bank that I don't even think the government really wants to stomach this. So there's a big question mark that hangs over Australia. Does depositors' money get protected by the government? That's the ideal situation. But then we also
apparently there's the bail-in legislation used to be a conspiracy theory, and that's actually now legal.
Of course,
it's in force. So
the factor of, because of the financial stability of the banking sector, not just because of protecting your savings, but for the financial stability of the entire sector, well, they're going to step in and they're going to what we'll understand is basically prevent any mass withdrawals from the banks, the bail-in, and you'll be limited withdrawals. It'll be that kind of scenario, I would imagine. So you got two sides. You got either the government's going to step in.
It's more than that, if I remember right. The bail-in is actually your deposits converted into bank equity. So then you actually you're no longer a depositor, which is a low-ranked creditor. You become a shareholder. So therefore, you can't actually ask them to pay you back because you're part of them. That's to my understanding.
Yeah, there's that factor. I know that there's that instrument that gets sold onto the market as well to unsuspected buyers that do that. So in the fact that they cannot afford to pay them out, they get the share instead, and that pushes down the valuation of their company in the process. But yeah, there's a number of ways. Obviously, that we can't. We're sort of looking at the crystal ball here as to what could happen. You would hope, you'd pray the fact that it will come to a situation where there'll be a nationalisation of people's deposits. But this is at the same time the fact that I think you're going to have to look at crypto at the same time. The fact that
Mm.
you've got this avalanche of debt crumbling around on you, and people potentially taking over and seizing bank accounts. You've got a public ledger which cannot be forged or cannot be censored. The fact that you own these things, it cannot be taken over by one institution. And the fact that you've got this public ledger technology, which I think is going to be a massive boon at this situation. People are going to gravitate to this fact, with the fact that no debt was generated when you do have a cryptographic asset, when in comparison, well, asset or something that the market consensus states that you have that in your possession, in comparison to a debt-fueled system which is kind of imploding in itself at that stage. So I see that as a rational point. Now, I don't know whether there's this kind of global change and consensus that goes over into cryptos, but it's definitely something that cannot be overlooked and shouldn't be understated. I know things are in a massive bad patch at the moment, let's say, but the amount of eyeballs and brilliant minds which are looking at this at the moment, I can't think of anything that you should really pay more attention to in your life, more so than crypto. And don't be susceptible to all the scam artists out there. You should be focused on the big ones, and once you can understand, then maybe expand on from there. And then obviously you've got carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm actually a little. I have hesitation about cryptocurrency in that the system. I like the blockchain technology idea in terms of the fact that, as you said, the ledger can be taken away from government control. So therefore, it could be created back as a free market. But the cryptocurrency market currently is acting not much differently to the fiat currency system, in that you could continue to create an unlimited number of cryptocurrencies. And you are right when you say that, yes, focus on the large cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
But the thing with the whole cryptocurrency is what people don't realize is that if you don't have it physically, you could a shutdown in the power grid could actually lead to you not being able to exchange it, to actually conduct exchange. And it's the whole idea of a power grid shutdown is not as ludicrous and far out as one would think, because in America, even in the Obama administration, they were aware that America is very vulnerable to a electromagnetic pulse radiation, either from the sun or from a nuclear weapon, that will shut down the system. Now, also with cryptocurrencies, I think people do not realize, a lot of people currently are trading cryptocurrencies as if it's a speculative instrument rather than a means of exchange. So I stand closer to Peter Schiff camp on cryptocurrencies, is that there's now a lot more cryptocurrencies than I can actually count relative to fiat currency. And secondly, you also have cryptocurrencies where the whole idea of a good means of exchange is stability in value. These days, they're hardly stable. And people are being taught continually by a lot of cryptocurrency. You have all these YouTube channels where these people are talking about cryptocurrencies, and they keep saying that, look, you got to get used to the 10% a day volatility and all that. And I'm going, well, if that's the case, don't call it cryptocurrency, it's a crypto asset. Because if I want to stomach daily volatilities of 10%, I'm going to play in derivatives. I'm currently buying gold mining stocks, and I don't really like a day when it goes up or down by 10%. I'm happy if it goes up 10%, but this whole volatility thing, I'm buying it knowing when I buy gold mining stocks, I'm buying for risk. But if I'm going for currency, I'm not buying currency to speculate. So again, it goes back to this whole, what are people being taught at school or in the media or just in the streets about finance? They have so little common sense.
Yeah.
The currency is not for speculation, even though some people speculate it, but it's like, don't try this at home, kids. This is actually for more prop traders and maybe the Mrs. Watanabes of Japan, who are doing carry trades with yen and US dollars. But yeah, cryptocurrencies, until someone settles people down and get them to realize this is a means of exchange, take it easy. I'll probably not venture into it. I like the blockchain technology, as I said before.
But yeah, I guess you made a number of interesting points about that. I guess like power down scenarios is a pretty bleak situation for most people. Now, if we get a power down system, that means Visa, MasterCard is down at the same time. So at that point, a lot of the systems that we have at play anyway, regardless of whether you're looking at crypto or not, are down. And you got more things to worry about, your water and sanitation and your lighting and electricity, which are all going to be a massive factor at that point. Now, I would always say that cash, I'm always a big proponent of government cash. I think government cash is a fantastic thing that people should never ever consider getting rid of. It's one of the most important backups that people can have is a cash system, because that will still work in that scenario.
Because it's so useless, that's the only thing you could use it for, is to exchange it for something else, and everyone agrees with the face value of it.
Yeah, but the problem is obviously ATMs are down as well. So unless you got cash under the mattress, there's a problem with that. Now you've got to treat people with kind, which I keep on emphasizing. Treating people with kind is probably more important than cash and all that kind of stuff. Yes, in that situation, that is probably the most prevalent thing that you need to have. But when it comes to like power down scenarios, it's pretty bleak at the best of times. And so, but let's just say of mass national power downs, it's still pretty rare. We're looking at something that's very rare.
Well, you look at South Australia though. That I still can't get over that joke that South Australia, one windstorm managed to cause a blackout in most of the state, and we're a first world nation. This ain't North Korea, right? It was embarrassing as hell.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now,
even within a few days, that could cause enough pandemonium, especially in an economic downturn and an economic crisis. You only need about 3 days of power out, and I reckon people you're gonna have pretty much. You wouldn't want to be stepping out in the streets at nighttime.
Yeah,
there'll be a lot of neighborhoods where you probably actually want to bug out and stay at a relative's for a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned another thing about the there's too many cryptos which are about, but this is the thing about too many. I agree with this. There is far too many. Now, let's just say if we look at Bitcoin, there's a reason why that does have the #1 status, in the fact that if you go to Satoshi Nakamoto's his white paper, what he actually invented was an ability not to double spend. So because we're on a public ledger technology where everyone broadcasts what they've paid to someone and what they've received, the fact is that you create a double spend. Say that I've paid that person on that ledger, that person, and I've paid that person at the same time. And then you've created a fault with the ledger and how it's progressed. Now, remember that with this public ledger, it's like a transaction log from every transaction from day one to today. And the fact that it can be the reason why Bitcoin is so valuable is because it has the biggest censorship resistance in the fact that you've got so many miners using these ASIC GPUs to find the next block. And it's becoming so complicated. Basically, you need to create the power of the entire mining pools, or get to the 51%, to attack the public ledger and create the double spend. And that would mean that you could rewrite the actual you could write the blockchain in your way. Then you can create your then the censorship resistance is broken at that point. But currently, obviously, there's this I can't remember whatever law it's called, but it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and much better for hack resistance over time. That is, it's not going to happen with something like Bitcoin. Now, if you look at all the shit coins that come out, it will happen with that. But that's the reason why there is so much value and validity in such a coin like Bitcoin and some of the other high ones. Now, I'd just say there's a value in Monero, something that is a privacy coin, because one of the most key components of having a unit of measure is the fact that you can't declare that one coin is worth more because it's been going through a KYC measure compared to another one which hasn't, like, you know what I mean. But basically, one has been declared as a good coin because it's gone through legitimate means, and one is a bad coin because it's been used for money laundering. So so you're devaluing. So part of the Bitcoin blockchain could be worth nothing, and declared by the state, whereas others could be called legitimate. But with something like Monero, it has used this ring signature. So the fact that you cannot tell one is where one has come from and where the other has come from, giving it more of the ability of being a virtual cash. And then, so that's the currency aspect of it alone. And then that's one area that you can think of into people's minds. The other aspect is the fact that we don't understand quite yet what decentralized applications and ledgers can do to society. You know how you mentioned about how society is shaped by incentives and like disincentives, how this low interest rate environment creates this certain mechanism in people to spend frivolously. We don't quite understand, and I don't think majority of the crypto world don't really talk about this. That's right. Much of the crypto world doesn't know the social engineering aspect of how decentralized ecosystems could work. Now, just to put it in this aspect, say if we created a platform where we were given financial incentives for certain things which were good in society. I don't know, let's just say we were given financial incentives to putting up street lighting, and every time we put an extra street light up, we'll get a token reward in return. And then that token could be monetized, and our incentive and the community's incentive is to build up more and more lighting until people thought, oh, there's too much lighting in here, so I'm not even going to buy any more of these tokens because there's a disincentive for it. So can you see, like, on those kind of lines, there's this decentralized movements of political organization which we don't even realize is brewing underneath this technology. You know how people, where they started with Bitcoin, people started to build these better PCs. They went out to the open worlds. They put the ASIC GPU chips into their computers, and they started to build on that. And they create, so they from something that's virtual, something in the real world is being adapted. Something in the real world is now consuming so much energy. That's going to be changed in the future. They're going to work out different ways of how to consume energy and use the computing power to be done for better means. All of these adaptations are going to be changed, but we don't understand. You know how we talk about over time, like how how I mentioned that like humanity works under a kind of thing of like throughout time we've been slaves. Well, since society has been created, we've created slaves, we've created serfs, and we're like there's a view that we're modern day sort of serfs in the fact
Yeah.
that we're always under um the
Well, we're chained to our work desk
of
because
course
of consumerism and our mortgages,
of,
our debt.
of
Yeah.
course we're stuck. We're not financially free as human beings. We To survive in this world we need to get the house, we need to get the shelter, we need to do all of these things, and maybe this is inevitable things of life, but you can see how this adaptation of decentralization can work in the benefit. You can see that, you know how like you think, okay, AI technology is going to come, and you think, oh shit, is this going to be good? This ain't going to be any good. This is going to turn into tears. You're going to get some megalomaniacal corporation that's going to use and adapt this system to create a artificial intelligence trading bot, and capitalism is going to have its evil way so that they absorb all the assets of the world and nobody will be left with anything else. But that isn't the way that it should work. It should be working that AI systems or automated robots or whatever should be going back into society to be the productive aspect of our life, so
Yeah.
that we can find freedom on the outskirts of that, to do more things to improve life, to produce more, to improve the quality of life, to find more meaning in life, to bring things back to us being more humane and more human, rather than us turning into computers. So I know I've gone on a big tangent here, but I just
No.
yeah,
It's not. It's not a tangent at all
it's
because we are
it's
still talking about where this whole system
of course, yeah,
could potentially get spoiled and then move
yeah. So
forward together.
cryptos, I definitely would say, is something that if anything, you need to educate yourself on. That's the number one, like one of the top ones that you need to educate yourself on, because I have no doubt in my mind it's going to change everything. People think it's this bloody speculative bubble that's going to fly away like some kind of pyramid scheme, but it's not. It's something that is going to bed its roots into the heart of the fabric of society that we live in. It might not change
The way
overnight. It
the
might
way
be in
I
20
see
years.
it, sorry
Sorry,
to interrupt,
that's
the way
okay.
I see cryptocurrencies and the blockchain technology making its way into society could be along the similar lines as the way you had the railroad boom and bust, you had the also the recent Nasdaq boom and bust. So yeah, there'll be a lot of people who are gonna lose their shirt, even the shirt on their back, on speculating cryptocurrencies. Doesn't I agree with you? It doesn't mean it's gone,
Yeah,
but people have to keep their wits about them in order that they they aren't going to they aren't going to see this whole thing come
yeah,
with their blood and tears as part of the collateral.
yeah,
Yeah, with the computers, it was the same type of thing. People went absolutely mad in the 1990s with the dot coms. Does that mean internet collapsed? No, internet's doing absolutely great. Thank you very much. But a lot of people look back at those tech stocks and they're bitter about it because they speculated with they lost their heads speculating in it, and this is the same type of thing which I'm seeing with cryptocurrencies.
yeah, yeah. And obviously, if you think, I've got this view that cryptos are going through accelerated market cycles. So the fact that you remember, I'm not sure if you recall, in 2014 there was the Mt. Gox crisis where the exchange was hacked.
Oh yes,
Now,
Yes.
it's never been the public ledger. Remember, a public ledger hack would have to be the 51% attack, where you need to have the most tremendous computing power to create a double spend attack. That isn't going to happen. But the exchanges and anything that is like on a web base where you put your private keys or any kind of like thing that you can seed into your key is always going to be susceptible, and exchanges are honeypots to these kind of things. So they are always going to be hacked. Recently, I think again, why it went down is because there was some kind of exchange which I think maybe in South Korea that just got hacked recently, and they announced to the market. It's never the actual public ledger technology that gets hacked. It's always the exchanges, these honeypots for hackers. So,
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. I think I think there's definitely going to be a future. But I would definitely put in the caveat that eventually I reckon the government or some central powers is to get their way through it into it. So always go back to first principles and have something physical as security for yourself, because I have no doubt that they're going to get their hands into it, be it the central banks or the governments, because and some people are even suspecting that this cryptocurrency blockchain technology was developed by these people in the first place to hurt them into the new system.
So yeah, this is one of my theories. I think about all of this is the fact that obviously Satoshi Nakamoto, a totally unknown person, came out of the his
It
studies.
came out of nowhere.
Yes, came out of nowhere. It's all about cryptography. That's all to do with who's involved with cryptography. It's all these spy agencies. They love that kind of stuff. So it doesn't take too much to put two and two together on that aspect. Now, the second thing is the fact that you've got this gigantic debt burden in, say, for example, America, that is just ginormous, that has to unravel, has to unwind, and that's been going on for the bond bubble has been going on for 30 years plus, and that has to crash at some point. Now, you could argue the fact that this was set up this way, the fact that this is one system which is dying, and this new system is the transfer. So the fact that we have a great conversion without as much pain as what it would be to collapse the debt. It's an argument, and I don't know whether a part of me believes it, a part of me doesn't believe it. That's something that could be that's so organised and disorganised, could be that relevant. But I'd just like to put those thoughts in people's minds, the fact that what could be happening could be organised. We don't necessarily know. Remember how in the past there was all this talk about special drawing rights. There'll be this new global currency that will take over. That seems to have totally dissipated totally. But cryptos...
It hasn't dissipated. It's still there.
It's there, obviously it's there, but it's not quite
they're actually rolling it. They're at the cusp of rolling it out, because they do anticipate that US dollar is going to collapse. I don't know when. And I reckon what could happen is that the special drawing rights and the cryptocurrency could be combined together somewhere along the way.
Right.
That's always a possibility. And being a Bible believing Christian, I mean, if I read the book of Revelation, I always remember that no matter what type of system we set up and say that we're going to be able to get ourselves out of central planning and all that, I always that no, eventually we'll be herded into it. So that's why I'm always cautious. But to each their own, I'd say, because not everyone necessarily believes in the Bible, and even within the Christian circle, people look at the book of Revelation and say, no, that's allegorical. don't take it literally, but I take it literally.
Of course, so I do see in the places that say, "Oh, cryptos are the mark of the devil." Like,
No, I think the 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 whole mark is not going to be just this single thing. It's not just a way. It's just not simply a way to trade. It's complete. It's about your complete submission to them. So that's why you could say it could be people watching Hollywood movies. It could be people accepting socialism, Marxism. It could be people implanting the little chips. Or did you hear about the news about the guy who implanted the Opal card in his hand, and apparently he got fined by the railway inspectors because apparently they did not accept that he had paid his train fare by tapping his hand, even though the thing actually accepted it.
Yeah, and the judge let him off in the end because it was exceptional circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's all these types of things where it like I just find it very interesting when I observe when I go just any development where it says bring everyone together in this using technology. I'm always a bit squeamish, and I go
yeah.
I'll watch what happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you say about bringing it back to principle is the fact that, okay, I could argue here the merits of Bitcoin being the number one and the most censorship resistant because of the amount of computing power it would take to take it over. But then it is a decentralized system for one, but there is some kind of like thing in place where voting and updates happen, so there is a little form of centralization which happens there. But
apparently the Federal Reserve was able to make arrests tracking down Bitcoin transactions about 2-3 months ago.
Because it's a public ledger. So obviously you might not necessarily know the who's behind the address, but you've got an address there and you can see the transactions. That's why there's the merit. That's why I mentioned the merits of Monero, because it uses ring signatures like Tor and onion browsers on the dark web. It uses those things to obfuscate or tracking, so you're not sure who it came from. It could have come from thousands of different peoples, but you'll never quite know, and that's why there's value in those kind of things. But yeah, there's, as I say, you could say, all right, Bitcoin is the mark of the devil, was the first one. It may have been set up by the NSA, whatever. But there is, again, to its merit, there's thousands of other ones which have coming up. So you could pick those, and it could be, everything can be decentralized. Everything can be a choice. The mark of the devil doesn't necessarily need to be principally with Bitcoin. People can choose other things. And choice is where our freedoms lie. So
anything which I know is, I would consider anything where it tries to hurt us to a centralized system, I'll be very cautious about. And I mean, I consider it satanic for anything to make us mandatory. It's mandatory. It's centralized. I go, okay, gotta be careful about that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, knock yourself out and be very careful with it and have fun.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, it's been very good to talk to you as always. I think I think at some point in the future, hopefully, we can get this arranged. The Humbug Show may have us on with a few other people, and we can have like a bit of a 4 or 5 way discussion about the topics. So at some point, we'll have to hear from that side, and we'll get that arranged. But it's been excellent to have you on, and I hope we can do some of these in the future, and we can look into how future events change and see how much our predictions sort of marry up to what happens in reality.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for having me on, Charles, and that for the almost 2 hours we had. We should also thank our wives and family, because they probably are wanting our company as well.
Yeah, we do have lives outside of this. Yeah, well, yeah. Thanks for your time, and yeah, we'll reconvene.